We'll do quick little intros. I know that Gary did some already, but he also left plenty of space for us to be able to elaborate a little bit. So we'll start with that. Amal, do you want to give a little bit more details on kind of what your background is?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for staying. I know it's kind of crazy out there. My name is Amal Nirgudkar. I'm the CEO of Patient Prism. And 8 years ago, we got into the AI business. Not 8 months ago, 8 years ago. And with the idea that we needed to make sure that everybody who was calling a dental office was actually scheduling an appointment, because we knew that there was problems at the front office in getting them to schedule an appointment. So we developed machine learning models that allowed a bot to listen to these calls and actually provide guidance, coaching. It used to take them three hours to do that. Now it takes about 35 seconds, so that more patients were able scheduling appointments. And AI was completely revolutionizing the way we were training, coaching, and enabling our front office people to actually become amazing sales folks on the phone, so that every patient had that opportunity to get in. So we primarily work with dental support organizations. That's 95% of our business. And now we work a lot with independent practices that do high-end, either orthodontic work or implants and full arch. We do a lot of work in full arch world as well.
Awesome. Greg?
Yeah, so my name is Greg Essenmacher. I'm the CEO and founder of G&A Consult. You've probably heard my name a few times up here, so you're wondering who the heck I am. So I work primarily and have historically with surgical centers that do full arch. I've been focused on the full arch lane for a decade now. I've been in dental for 16 years. I helped launch the Neodent brand into the US market, but don't worry, I'm not 100% loyal to them. I get to be Switzerland now that I have my own consulting business. I and my team really focus on every touch point of the patient journey. So what you've heard here this entire conference, from the marketing side and working with marketing companies on that branding. And when I talk about branding, it's not just what is in the digital marketing. Branding has to do with every piece of that patient journey. So for example, if in the digital marketing you're calling it a CT scan and it's a complimentary consultation, is it called a CT scan for the person doing the lead call? When they come in, do they talk about taking a CT scan? Or do they call it a CBCT? Or do they call it a CAT scan? So is there continuity in language and verbiage? That's a part of branding. So for every touch point of that patient journey, I do training and coaching every step of the way. When I need some heavy hitters, I talk to people like Stacy or other treatment coordinators and bring them in for the heavy hitting pieces. And then I'm also a business partner with practices as they're adding in full arch, because as you've heard, it's a much different type of ball game when you're talking about direct to consumer compared to referral when it comes to patients, using platforms like that's been created by Amal, and I'll be happy to get into some of that as well. And just really honored to be here and working with clients and helping them with profitability and cash flow, and doing it responsibly when adding full arch into their practices and doing it profitably, and understanding before you even get into it, if you haven't gotten there yet, what are the steps that it really takes in order to do so? Because it's not one of those of, we'd like to add in clear aligner therapy or tooth whitening. It's a much different ball game in full arch, as you've heard, and to understand what all those steps are and what the investment is into full arch and adding it to your practice or practices is something that I can help to navigate with you, or others like me can do so, and that's really what we do.
Awesome. Well, to help fill in a little bit too about myself, my background is I have built and sold now out of 2 different DSOs. So I've been in the trenches. One of those DSOs was primarily GP focused with a lot of specialty in there, including full arch. And so it was during that time that I really kind of found my passion, which is technology and processes. And so it was during that I pivoted out of it and actually decided to create a company called Unify. And so we are addressing the fragmentation of technology across the space. So appreciate Gary having me on today. I mean, as we're going to be able to chat about today, there's so many different touch points that we have along this patient journey that technology plays a role in. And keeping track of that, I mean, it literally is a full-time job. I've been able to do it and kind of pay attention to the landscape for a period of time. And it's something that there is a lot going on that it's hard to kind of manage and keep your hands wrapped around. So we're excited to chat a little bit about it today and have incredible experience on this table. So throughout this conversation today, we want to break it apart into really kind of 4 different segments, right? The first one being, what does the technology look like prior to getting a patient in the door? How do we get them in the door, right? That marketing world. Then we'll chat through what happens when they're actually in the practice, what kind of technology can we utilize in order to do things like drive better case acceptance, et cetera. When they leave the practice, right, what does that engagement look like? How do we keep them involved if they've said yes? How do we keep them involved if they said no? And then also kind of the last one being, there's all this technology that we use to help train and develop our own team members. What do we do with that, right? How do we keep things like our SOPs and our processes defined, and how do we keep them in a good tech platform in order to make sure that they're effective? Okay, so we'll chat through those kind of 4 different ones, and we'll go ahead and start off at the very beginning, which I think is honestly probably the hardest piece of this, is what technology are we utilizing in order to get patients in the door? So Amal, I know this is kind of your bread and butter sweet spot. Obviously, kind of Patient Prism is a piece of it, but as you think about Patient Prism within this prior to getting it in the door, what other technologies are you seeing around Patient Prism as well?
You know, dentistry over the course, I think ClearChoice was the pioneer in getting dentistry into this direct-to-consumer model, right? Before them, nobody did B2C correctly. It was all a specialty, all referral-based. And they kind of created some of the rules of engagement when it came to patient acquisition, patient nurturing. They were the first company in the world to actually use Salesforce to nurture a patient, which is kind of crazy, right? It's a $5 million implementation to get Salesforce in your office. I mean, most people cannot do that. So the idea behind, and what dentistry overall has evolved to is very much because of the private equity players that have come in, which is mostly who we work with. They're very driven, if you've worked with private equity, they're very driven by numbers, and they're very driven by the concept of patient acquisition cost. And so technology now, obviously, most of new patients today come from digital means. Usually, pay-per-click is the number one mechanism where you attract customers, and Google PPC is kind of 85% of that. If I don't know if I'm here on the marketing thing, so maybe Gary will tell me something different. But the first piece of technology that you're doing to get a patient in the door is making sure your website has the right content, and it's not a brochure, but it's actually a living, breathing organism that attracts the people in your demographic, so they can find you. And if they can't find you, then you have to have an ad to get them to find you. And obviously, there's been evolution on how to build sites that convert, how to build campaigns that convert, and there is tons of technology used now to be able to generate the rankings and on SEO as well as on PPC to make sure that you're resonating. So that's the first aspect, right? You've got to get attention. What somebody told me the other day is that it was a great quote: "Is attention is the new currency of today." I mean, as we know, we're scrolling up and down. It's attention, right? Everybody's wanting our attention, and so attention is the new currency. So if you can get people to pay attention to you, then they're going to want to do something with that. And that step is the first step in the patient journey, is grabbing their attention and then meeting them where they want to be met at. And so technology plays a big part of it. SMC does a great job at figuring that out. They use technology, obviously human resources, but to figure out what people want. And then it comes to the point where, okay, what do you get that patient to do? Right? You get them to fill out a form, you get them to make a phone call, you get them to schedule online. There's online scheduling technology that's great. It's got some issues, but it's getting better. Telephones is where we get involved in, is that what happens when you have the first impression with the human being that's actually going to say hello. And the moment somebody says hello, you know whether they care about you or not. Right? Hello, and then the whole thing that happens, right? So we deployed AI, specifically natural language processing, which gives machines the ability to understand human language, to be able to say, okay, what in that conversation prevented the patient from moving forward in their journey for their own health, right? And over a period of time, AI was an incredible technology to use in this case, because AI can it can listen to or read a 10-minute conversation in half a second, right? So humans can't compete there, right? You can't do that 10 minutes in half a second. So the idea was to be able to extract not just the keywords out of the conversation that happened, but contextually understand what the patient wanted and what prevented them from moving forward. So that the idea, now that you're spending money on marketing, now that cost per lead, cost per start, cost per acquisition rates are going up every single year. Google Ads went up by 40% last year. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that you can drive, if you're spending money, the private equity folks come tell me, I got $5,000, Amol makes sure that I make $50,000 from this. So they are very, very, very intentional about how much money they want to spend and how much money they want to get. And then the good news is we help them do that. We help them like, okay, $5,000 in your budget, and what do you want to get? And we want to make sure that's accountable. So part of what AI is being used for is the sales enablement function, right? It's called sales enablement. Is we are making sure that the selling process is actually alive and well on your phone. It needs to be alive and well at the TC level, at all those people once they come in, but at the very beginning of their journey when they find you and they call you, that's important. Now, technology is being used throughout the journey of the patient, and we can talk more about that. But from our perspective, at the top of the funnel, where you're getting interest, you have to have great technology and a great marketing a partner that knows how to deploy it to make sure the right people find you in the demographic that you're in, and you earn their trust, because you need to get them to the next step. And dentistry is all really about getting patient to the next step. Once you figure that out, then it's easy. It's not about just spending more money on marketing. It's getting the patient from point A to point B to point C, point A. And eventually, as long as you get them through that process, there's technology that's going to enable you to that patient that comes at the top of the funnel to go all the way to the bottom of the funnel. At the bottom of the funnel, basically, they have accepted treatment. They have gotten the treatment. Now they are living great lives. They have great jobs. They have a great girlfriend. Whatever they want, right? Great health, whatever they may want. That's the point of all of this, is to make humans better, and technology is just a lever to do that. So sorry, that's a long answer, but that's the point. That's how we get involved in the patient acquisition space.
Yeah, I like what Brian Kaleo talked about, though, unrealistic expectations, I think. So what did you say? Better job, better girlfriend? We just can't advertise that.
That's
I love what you do, though.
That's right. I can say that. He can't.
Amal's much smarter than me on the tech side, so I'm going to just
that.
not touch that one for now. So forgive me on that. Well, and Amal works in the DSO space with the larger groups, and I work a lot with the small practices, small emerging groups. And so my take's a little different. But I'm curious of everyone that's in here, because it'll really formulate my answer to this. And so just a show of hands, how many in here are doing more than one full arch a week? So you're doing great. That helps me to know and how many, so you can leave your hand up if you like, more than one full arch a month. Okay, so that's really helpful. And the reason why I ask that, because for myself, with programs that, with Patient Prism and other programs, technology for me is all about what is the capacity, what is the opportunity, and where do you want to go with that, especially when it comes to the first touch point of the patient journey. So when there's that first engagement point, and when you're taking that pipeline and moving that patient through the process, so there's some type of initial interest shown by that patient, whether it's a form fill or they call. Hopefully if they call, you answer the phone. Right, because we don't want to talk about the 30+% of phone calls that go unanswered, which Amal and his team have that dialed in, right? So if you're talking about a form fill and you engage and you leave a message for them and that back and forth goes, having that information and that knowledge. Well, what I know to be true with all the groups that I work with and the practices that I work with, if there's an opportunity to start engaging, what is the process of following them through? And if it isn't a dialed-in process, you're doing like one a week, right? At least one a week. That's great. But if you're newer and you have technology that says, yes, we know how to engage with patients, and we have this technology that shows the CRM that we heard about or others that actually just gives information, and we see how patients move through a pipeline, if you will. There needs to be some accountability for the individuals that are responsible for moving these patients through a pipeline. Because that first touch point, the second touch point, the third touch point, not that we don't trust y'all, But I can tell you from experience that when I start working with practices on those lead calls, if I ask them, so have you reached out to them 1, 2, 3 times? The answer is always, yes, of course. But then when I go into the software and I look, it's like, well, did you really? And the second piece is really listening to the calls together and coaching on the calls together and having them listen to the calls of how are they engaging with the patient. So I love Deep Lens, called Deep Lens, and other programs where you can actually understand like engagement and intentionality, and you can really start to hear it and see it. But when you have something simple, and I teach a simple formula, I do like acronyms. If Josh is still in the room, sorry. If it's memorable, they'll remember it. And mine's EAZ, empathy, assurance, you called the right place. Z, don't put them to sleep, right? You know, a little bit more energy than the caller has. This is important because once you start to give that feedback loop with the people that are taking the lead calls, they start to move patients through this pipeline. Technology is great to utilize, but it doesn't replace the human experience. And then it's not so much oversight, but it's the accountability piece. When that phone rings, when you get engagement after you've spent the money already, because that's hit your P&L, right? You've already spent that money on the marketing. That phone could be a $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 case. And so holding accountable, and it's really that teaching and coaching when you're implementing this new system, right? We love talking about systems, right? It's true, it's a system, it's a process. We know that doing something over and over for 21 straight days is how you learn something new. And so learning that rote memory of something new, and I'm telling you, those that I work with that take these lead calls, when you teach them that new skill and they start to have success with it, so it's this marrying of the technology. So whether it's Patient Prism or other technology that's being implemented right at that lead touch point to be able to capture them. And we can talk about like calling them within 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We can talk about all the metrics that I work with and others work with, but it's that accountability piece of utilizing the technology, knowing where you want to go with it, and then implementing it and holding it to it. And it doesn't mean that all the doctors out here, it doesn't mean that you have to do it.
Right.
It's just understanding what is the process that you're going to follow and then implementing it and sticking to it and holding people accountable.
It's really important point. I talk about this a lot, is that if you can't convert information into insight and insight into action and action into results, there's no point of having the information. So give you an example, a month ago, patient named Beth calls one of our offices, one of our clients. It's 4:55 p.m. The woman had just turned 66, I think. She started getting Social Security. Did not have, had dentures that were causing lots of problems. 4:55 calls in and said, hey, I've heard about this I need fixed teeth. And she has a conversation. She's slow in speaking, and the receptionist on the other end is getting antsy because it's getting to 5. At 4:59 p.m., the receptionist said, we're closing for the day. Would you mind calling back tomorrow? Happens all the time. We're closing for the day. The patient hangs up the phone at 4:59. At 5 o'clock, Patient Prism sends an alert to the doctor's Apple Watch saying, you just lost 50 grand. The doctor gets on a phone call with the woman, says, where do you live, ma'am? I live in Clearwater. This was in Tampa. I said, how would you like me to send you an Uber to pick you up tomorrow morning, and we'll get you a free exam and x-rays and get you a CT scan. Maybe he called a CAT. But whatever he called it. He said, we would love to send you an Uber. And they sent an Uber Black. Brought the woman in. 8:30 in the morning. Accepted treatment. Got financed. I think Proceed did the deal, which was a longer term because they're experts at that. And that's how. And you know what it is? At the end of the day, AI is great, but we just changed that woman's life. Why? Because we figured out something happened and we intervened. That's the power of AI. It's not about these robots running around and ChatGPT. It's really about getting that woman in that office within 12 hours because we understood where we screwed up. And we were able to improve that woman. And that's the point of accountability, is the instant accountability that AI provides now is unheard of. We couldn't have thought about this 2 years ago. And so that's how I think about technology. As long as it makes humans better and it allows us these second chances to make first impressions, then we're moving society forward and we're making patients healthier. And that's what it's all about. It's really not about the technology. It's not about the technology. It's really about getting the patients into what they need. And part of that is the change management aspect, which Greg focuses on.
Well, and I love that, and it's really then the opportunity to either coach up or coach out, right? I know that there's labor challenge. I understand that. But when you're starting to either implement or level up your game in your practice with Full Arch, think about the amount of investment, the resource investment that you are making in Full Arch. Just think about that for a moment. We're not even talking the technology side, right? We're not talking about, if you need a CBCT machine, or if you need an iOS, or if you're going completely digital, or, I could go right down the list of all the investment pieces, and that's really what I work with practices on, of what the investment side is to level up your game to be able to compete with ClearChoice, the frontline practices, ADIC. I could go right down the list of the surgical centers if you're going to compete with that, because that's really what you're competing with, right? The technology can certainly assist, but it's the human capital side and being able to coach up those individuals. And it could have just been a missed opportunity for that individual that has been the typical mindset of somebody had told them, an office manager, no offense to office managers, right? But they could also be on metrics of there's no overtime available because we're trying to keep our costs down, right? So it could simply have been that mindset because we haven't done the big cases before, or we're not accustomed to doing that. So it's a shifting of mindset and the ability to flex and adjust, utilizing technology. I know we're talking about technology, but it's not a silo. You have to consider all the implications around it. And that's where utilizing, what is your end goal in mind with utilizing a piece of technology? And that's where a piece of AI can then surface around and utilize.
So, yeah, so I wanted to, and appreciate these thoughts. I wanted to kind of chime in a little bit and just kind of say that, like, the framework in which I view how anything gets done in the office, right, is the people, the process that the people follow, and the technology that enables you in that process, right? Just recognizing that the technology does not exist, to Greg's point, without the rest of what goes on in there, right? The people that are actually executing it, or the steps in which they're following it, process perspective, right? And so I think that in summary a little bit, and we'll jump on then to case presentation and case closing, because I know that's a big piece as well. But in summary of the marketing, right, it's figuring out what is your demographics, understanding where are your current pitfalls, and then understanding what technology fills in this gap in order to help with the pitfalls. Right? And we say technology because I think there's a lot of cool and exciting things out there. The reality is understanding what is the process that is being accomplished anyways, regardless of the technology, the first step. And I think that's where a lot of the offices are falling short, is that there was a comment of how many phone calls go unanswered, right? We got to understand that, right? And so we're understanding who is even someone that called in of interest, making sure that we're keeping up with them. You know how many offices I've seen that have done Google Sheets first, CRM, before they go in official CRM, right? Like the more basic stuff is fine. It works great until you actually start to understand your process, and then you can backfill with that a lot more. Yeah, I mean, technology in general. Right, so let's go ahead then and jump in. Let's say we've got a patient in the door. We've presented the treatment to them. Now we want to go ahead and help them kind of understand the importance of this, and then making sure that we're working with them. So for treatment presentation, right, there is the ability to use technology to enable it, to be able to make it more effective. Greg, I'll start with you on this one. Kind of what are you seeing that some offices are utilizing and other offices aren't to help them be more effective in the treatment presentation side?
Yeah, it's a great question, and there's a lot of pieces out there. One thing that I'm finding that's really interesting and exciting, there is technology out there, and it used to be through, exocad, where you could take pictures of patients when they come in. It depends on what your workflow is. Hopefully, if you're doing a complimentary, not a free consultation, words matter. Words matter with all the practices that I use. So if you're not using the word complimentary for consultation and you're using the word free, that's a nugget for you. I strongly suggest change that vernacular in your practice today, because free means that there's no value in it. But if it's complimentary, then it's trust me, it's different. When it comes to the treatment, we've heard a lot about that it's an emotional connection with patients. And if they can see what their brand new smile can look like after the treatment instantaneously, and there's some products out there where you can take just a simple set of pictures when you're at the beginning phases of the consultation, when they first come in for their consult, and within minutes be able to show them fairly accurately what that smile looked like. Now, they're not going to know about a midline and all that. We're all in dental, right? So we're immediately going to look and be like, well, that midline's off. That doesn't really look that accurate. But to show them that before and after, case acceptance definitely going up. Though that's one piece that's out there in the marketplace that can certainly be helpful. We talked about the physical models, how you're setting up your presentation, and Stacy talked about the clinical versus the sales process. Those pieces are essentially essential to being successful. Sometimes the more complicated you get with technology, the more complex it gets. And so I was talking about that smile design and showing it to them. Having something they can take with and take home, that can be a powerful tool. And I know we talked about in the consultation itself, but that's a part of the pipeline management as well after they go home, and that follow-up piece. Because having same day yes, Stacy closes and she shared that at like 70, 80, 90% her clip of closing, that 30% are that same day she's getting cash from the patient. Well, that means what, 40, 50% are doing it within a couple of days. So that's pipeline management stuff. And that's really having the tools and technology as well. And I might be jumping ahead of where you wanted to go. But in the consults themselves, it doesn't necessarily have to have all the bells and whistles. It just have to have some of those basics of taking a CT, showing them the bone structure, not scaring them, but just sharing with them the visual information that can be critically important. I'm aware that like in general dentistry of being able to show and like prove that, well, there's some cavities here, or, there's some issues going on. In full arch, it's really the bone structure and how much bone loss there is, and then some good old-fashioned models from like Kilgore, of like what it shows of bone loss in the 5 stages, and taking the two together and really being able to share that without scaring the bejesus out of them and showing them what some options are.
Don't show those videos.
Those videos are just bad. And just one other comment too, and I'll share this, and I don't know if it's technology, but if you're using the term zygomatic or pterygoid implants in any part of your consultation, please stop. Please call them specialized implants, because your patients will go home and Google or YouTube zygomatic implants, and you will not be able to close those cases. If you can and you're using that, then more power to you. But really giving too much information to patients. Sometimes we in the industry have too much information and we verbally vomit all over patients, or we use too much technology that actually scares them away from moving forward with treatment. And I certainly have some other ideas on that too that I share, but I don't want to take all the time.
I mean, this is your field, so I don't do anything when people get in the office. But the only thing I can comment on this process is, as you think about technology adoption within your offices, what I see struggles is you're putting so much on the team members in the office to do so many things. That keeps rising every year. Oh my God, I need this. Now I need that. I need that. And how many things are you going to burden people with? And so you have to be aware of that. And the most technology implementations fail in organizations because people just can't rally around. It's not part of their workflow. So we do a lot of work with larger organizations in figuring out how to operationalize it within the workflow so that it becomes a seamless part of what you do every single day. Whatever the process is, whatever process he develops, right? It's got to be part and parcel of what's done automatically every single time. And this is what ClearChoice was, right? They built perfect playbooks for everything that happened. When did the tour happen? The beginning of at the beginning or the end of the journey? What was said on that tour, or the patient tour, was scripted and planned, and for the most part, it was 95% consistent, because they knew that if they did this, and they had KPIs around that, right? Their case acceptance rate went down by 20%. when the tour happened at the end of the journey and end of the appointment versus the beginning. So this, again, the technology so they had the KPI that they measured of how it affected. So this is how the impact of technology was. They said, oh my God, we've got to do these tours at the very beginning of the process. And that made all the difference. And so figuring that out, I call them micrometrics, is important in the organization because they give you insight into, yes, we have all the amazing tools and technologies, but at the end of the day, if we can't get people to use them in a way that doesn't become a burden, but it becomes an extension of what they already do and it helps them spend more time with the patient, that's the game that most of these larger organizations are playing to make sure that $1 here becomes $20 over there.
Well, and you bring up a really good point, and you mentioned team, and it really is a team sport when it comes to full arch. When you're talking $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 cases, it's not so much of in general dentistry, and God bless the general dentistry of the world. It drives production revenue tremendously so. It's just not an area that I've been in for very long. I've been in implant dentistry, and for all 16 years in dentistry, I just haven't been in that side of the world. I'm learning more about it as I bring in partners for that side and to help practices in that side. But what I know to be true is that when I say a team sport, utilizing technology, one example, and you heard from Proceed and you heard questions like, how many finance companies should I have? Truth be told, most practices that I work with, for me, 3 or 4 is really a magic number. But getting savvy and trained and understanding, if you aren't doing consults for full arch like 5, 6, 7 times a day, 3, 4 days a week, I mean, that's a lot. Like if you're doing that, you're going to get pretty proficient like within a month of being able to like tap 3 or 4 of them and go right down the list. If that's not the case, then it is about a system and process of how do you get to the point where you can soft pull those credits and understand pretty instantaneously in a grid in your mind to be able to present to the patient what type of options are available and what's best for them between all of these companies. So what is that pause or break in the consultation with the patient so it doesn't feel like a break with the patient, because it's all about that momentum. You heard about it, right? The momentum with the patient. So what is it that you can do in your system and process? And there's things to put into place. Absolutely. You have to go back then to what is the consultation process? Is it treatment coordinator led or is it doctor led? There's no right or wrong answer. Some happen to be better than others because some clinicians are extremely good at the consult process. And there's some that we really want them to really stay focused on the clinical aspect and really pop in, do a little bit on the diagnosis of the bone quality, and then leave the rest to the treatment coordinator. Because the treatment coordinators can be coached and trained and really strong in that. There's some that have what I call the patient concierge, which is takes the patient from the reception area, does the pre-records, turns it over to the clinician, it's clinician-led, and then it goes to a third person, which is a financial coordinator. So there's no right or wrong. It just matters of where are the strengths that you have, where do you want to build up and train and coach your team members, and then what tools are out there and available to strengthen and make everyone better in the process. And I share that because it's critically important to know that there isn't one right way for any particular area, for any particular practice, for the team that you have. It could be that you want to recruit in a particular area or create hybrid roles. Because again, if your practice is 60, 70, 80% where you want top line production and revenue coming from other, not from full arch, or if you're doing single implants or implant bridges and it's successful and you want to add to, that's a much different model than if you want to transition a practice like I helped to do. Case in point, so it was a clinician I met in 2018, 6 practices. And when I first met him, he was telling me his woes about he had 3 employment challenges, we'll call them, and 2 of his practices of 6 weren't, they were losing money. And I told him straight out, my words to him were, if you don't sell those practices or invest in turning them around, you're a fool. That was like 10 minutes after meeting the guy. I'm pretty direct, by the way. So if you do reach out to me, just know I'm direct. I'm from Detroit originally. It happens. So, but the story was, I said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what's your vision? And he said, I want to be a full arch surgical center, because he had his inspiration from, some of you may know Mike Golpa, right? That was a friend of his. They went to dental school together. But that's what I want to be. I said, okay, well, let's vision that out and see what it looks like. A year and a half later, he had his surgical center and he had 1 feeder satellite office. And within another 6 months after that, he was doing 18 to 20 arches a month. And 6 months ago, he was doing 30 arches a month. That was his goal. That's what he wanted to become. 85% of his revenue was coming from full arch. If that's what you want to be, great. But that's not what most of my clients now are becoming. They want to add this. So what are the tools that you need? And what does it make? Start with the end in mind. How do you implement those tools? Just like with the patient financing. It'd be nice if it's one size fits all, but all the patients don't come in with a 770 credit score with $150,000 plus in their income, household income. I mean, wouldn't that be nice if they all were? They'd be layups. And so what tips and tools and technology do you have? And the last thing that I'll say about that is, what technology do you already have in place that you're only using like 50% of, that have other pieces? Because most technology and most companies and vendors, and I love my vendors, trust me, I come from the manufacturing side originally, where this is what it can do for you, this is how quickly it integrates for you, and then it takes 3 times as long to integrate. It only has about 1/3 of the functionality, and then once you implement it, there really isn't the uplift afterward. And so really doing your sourcing and your vending on the front end and having somebody to help you through that and know what questions to ask, critically important when it comes to any piece of technology.
Yeah, I think that I want to kind of just summarize what I've heard, and you guys fill in any of the gaps, right? Right now, especially on the treatment coordination side, there is no silver bullet technology perspective, right? This is a very, very people-dependent process of making sure that you're making that interaction, that connection. There is no really kind of magic tool you can go out there and take somebody that's closing 30% cases, make them close 90%. Right? This is really kind of a skill set that you have to develop over time and through reps, and it is something that you kind of just have to practice. So we wanted to emphasize, though, that there is things that you can on the clinical side to help with that emotional connection with the patient, right? There's the perfect smile out there, et cetera. And then we've also seen a lot of the tools that help in the GP world to close other cases, like the AI imaging softwares. It may not be as effective here because it's not like I'm sitting there and saying, oh, we need you to understand that this is a cavity, right? They are understanding that this is a full arch, right? It's a completely different type of diagnostic show. And so we do want to kind of put out there that those AI imaging really do help a lot with the treatment presentation of other types of treatment. I wanted to throw that out there. All right, so then let's say we've got this case we presented to the patient. They've walked out the door. Greg, you said a little bit already. We've got about 20 minutes. I want to leave a little bit of time to any questions. So maybe we can run through what happens afterwards. It's very similar to what happened before you get them in the door as well. And then I do want to spend a little bit of time on how do we help our team actually learn and develop all of these processes. Are there technologies that help with that?
Yeah, so there's one that I know of, and it's a great tool, and I know there's a few others out there that really help with. I call it either manually automated or automated when it comes to pipeline management and follow through. And as great as they are when it comes to full arch, it's not quite there yet, but we're managing to make it work. It's kind of like the square peg in the round hole type of situation. But what I really like is you can set it up on automated where it does pull right from your PMS system, and I think it's from like 5 of the 6 of the major PMS systems. It pulls right from the treatment plan, sends out to the patient in common vernacular. It doesn't put all the scary words and stuff in it, but it puts out in common vernacular. And it has, I'll just be honest, right? It has like the cheesy, like animated, and I'm like, that doesn't work for my clients. So you can actually do the customized video. So if you do have a patient testimonial or you have something like that, you can have that go out as well in an automated way where you can set up the cadence of, at 1 day, 3 days, 5 days, whatever the case is, you can set that cadence, or what I call the manually automated, because pipeline management for these cases, and I use the stoplight feature, which is it's either green, yellow, or red when you have a consult done. Green is go, which means you better be following up with them either later that day, the next morning, the following day, the day after that. These are red hot. They got to go back and talk to their spouse. They want to check with their own personal financing, whatever the case may be. The yellow is, they're kind of medium warm. And the red is, it's really a no-go. They're not going to be moving along more than likely. And the reason why I say that is, again, this is for the rest of the team or those that are coaching them or those that are overseeing them in the practice, or even for the clinician to look and say, when is the follow-up happening with these individuals and what's the frequency that's happening? Because these are big cases, and simply implementing a simple stoplight like that and then a program where you can do the manually automated or the automated, all you need is one case to happen in a quarter, let alone a month, when you're talking about a $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 productivity for something that might cost you like $300 a month. And so the uplift on the front end of implementation is really what you have to be mindful of, because humans have to do that process, and it does take a little bit of effort in the front end. So if that's something you're interested in doing, that's something you have to know that you have to put the effort forth. But again, be mindful whenever you're going to invest in something like that, if they say it's going to take a week, how long is it going to take them all? 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks?
Absolutely.
Sometimes
never.
Yeah, sometimes never, of programs that you're going to implement. But that's where having somebody who can help guide you through different vendors and work through the speak of that.
I really want to applaud SMC for launching Trackable. Such a need for a CRM in the dental world, and it's not there. Nobody has it. Nobody can implement Salesforce, HubSpot. Can't afford that in a dental practice. So to be able to do those touch points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it is really where the big guys. By the way, the guy wanted to have the same cars as Galpa. That was the motivation. Yeah, he's got some nice cars. But no, it is the CRM aspect of this, and it's going to revolutionize our industry. CRM 1.0 were those patient engagement platforms that just did mindless texting and reminders and all that stuff. But CRM 2.0 or maybe 3.0, which Trackable is, it really understands what the patient needs and wants and nurtures them according to what they want. And to be able to do this in your context of full arch, it is going to be the best return on investment of anything you will ever do. From a ROI perspective, it's going to be thousands of % to invest in a CRM, which costs very minimal. So great job. I really congratulate Gary and Ryan and the entire team for actually thinking of this. When they told me this a year ago that this was the plan, I'm like, man, the dentistry badly needs the ability for us to nurture patients in a meaningful way that gets, especially the people who are going to spend 50 grand with you. They want to be coddled and nurtured, and you'd be doing that.
Well, and to comment on that, when you see any technology tool, the end in mind is to be able to engage and create the momentum. And so if you're looking at here's an example. If you're looking at a patient, for example, that's calling in, that's engaged, and you've played phone tag with them 3 or 4 times, to have that center console, and that was the first exposure I had was yesterday when I saw it, to have that center console and to be able to see instantly how much engagement happened with that patient. When I coach and train people that do lead calls, if I see that the back and forth happen, and when you finally get that patient on the phone, and the comment is, I'm so sorry we've been playing phone tag, I'm really busy. Instantly in my mind, what I'm coaching and training that individual on the lead call is that this is a busy person. I'm assuming this person is probably gainfully employed, probably moving up in the world. And why is it that they're calling about a full arch? Something has changed in their fairly recent history, last year to 2 years, that is probably making them a pretty darn good candidate for that third-party financing. So this is a ripe lead that we're trying to engage with. So words that I'm going to coach and train to be using is, what are the USPs, UVP, unique value proposition, I call them unique selling propositions, of your practice that can help to, we're fully digital in what we do, and that helps us to cut down the number of appointments for you to be able to come in or to expedite their appointment. Great. Today is Tuesday. I have tomorrow at, Wednesday at 10 a.m. or Thursday at 1 p.m. Which one works better for you to come and see us? We'll expedite your consult. In 45 minutes, we'll be able to get you in and out. These types of things to be able to know right away. And by having a CRM that tells you the number of engagements, if not, it would pop up and it'd be the first engagement. maybe not necessarily, right? So for the gal that was talking really slowly,
Yeah.
right? You're not going to be like, oh, we can get you in and out. She probably wants to be coddled and nurtured through, not necessarily, but these are the types of pieces. This is how to utilize technology to your advantage. And it may seem subtle, and you may be thinking, well, of course, Greg, like any idiot would know that. But to have it right there on the screen, other systems and trying to piecemeal technology to be able to figure out where are they in the pipeline? Have I called them before? Let me check this system. I have listened to thousands and thousands of calls, recorded calls. And if somebody's newer, when I say newer, they've probably only done like 300-400 of these lead calls. They're still searching in different systems to try to find the information. So to have it collated in one spot, that's the optimization of technology in order to be able to improve the efficiency that's going to get you to where you want to go, which is these big cases, it's uber competitive. It is, I mean, Brian talked about
You
it,
have to send
Stacy
Ubers
talked
for that.
about it. Right,
It's
exactly.
Uber.
Right. I didn't even realize that. Yeah, but that, they are.
You
and
know,
that's important.
Greg brought up a great point, and it's not relevant to technology, but it's one of my favorite books. It's called The Catalyst. Came out 2 years ago, written by a Wharton professor called Jonah Berger. And it's called Catalyst, How to Change Anyone's Mind. Very powerful. And the concept he brought up was those options that you gave the patient 8:30 on Tuesday and Wednesday at 2:30. It's the concept of granting autonomy to a person. Right? And the reason that works from a psychological perspective is when you transfer power to the patient, when you transfer power to the other person, and you make them choose, they feel empowered. And its simple example of that is Mr. Berger, Dr. Berger points out in his book is that you have a son who you want him to eat broccoli at dinner, and you said, son, we have broccoli today. You have to finish your broccoli today when you're eating dinner. The idea of granting autonomy is that and they're going to say no, obviously, when you tell them to eat broccoli. They don't like it. But when you present it as a transfer of power, it said, son, would you like to eat broccoli first or mac and cheese first? And then they choose, like, I'm going to eat broccoli first. You transferred power. It's their decision. They're going to stick by their decision. Very powerful concept. But if you end up reading Jonah Berger's The Catalyst, it has yellow cover, How to Change Anyone's Mind. It's very powerful. Whether it's in your office or in personal life, I use those techniques on my kids all day long. And they pointed out to me, Dad, that you can't use that against me. And it's really cool, though. It's really cool how do you affect people's psychology. And I love Greg. What he does is he incorporates these psychological techniques in making sure that, because if we don't understand that, then we can't get the patient moving forward.
And to just finish the loop, and I'll turn it back over to you. If you remember earlier today, when closing that lead call, when you do confirm with a patient that they're going to come in for a consult, it's asking them the question, how would you prefer for me to send out the confirmation, by text or email? Yeah. You give the power back to the patient, and that will actually help to reduce your no-shows. We track this with many of the offices that I work with, where we started, where most of them were at and said, great, I'll email that over to you. And then we just simply transferred it over to, how would you prefer to be followed up with, by text or email? That simple change reduced, hopefully it was some of the training I was giving them too, but it reduced no-show rates by double digits. Going from, they were in like the low 40s down to the low 30s. It was amazing. But that's that transference of power back to the patient, where they now feel empowered, and for a sense of obligation of, oh, well, kind of up to me now. And whether they actually showed, or if they would rebook on their own and call and give notice of saying, you know what, I just can't make it, let me reschedule that appointment. There's a sense of obligation there. So.
Okay. Well, Amal, Greg, thank you so much. Gary, do we have any questions? Or do we not do any questions on this one? Okay, just wanted to make sure that we had that open. So then that gives a few more minutes then to chat about kind of the last piece of this, which is team management, right? You've got this processes, you've got a person in your office who's excellent at it, though. How do you actually transfer that knowledge of wealth, right? So how do we make sure that we're training our teams? What kind of learning management systems do we have in place? What kind of technology are we?
The Catalyst. Jonah Berger, yellow cover.
Yeah, and I was going to ask if there are any questions. Feel free to just raise your hand, and we'll, if there's anything that's come up with what we've shared, any tools that have been shared, or any questions on technology, we'd be happy to answer them. And I'm sorry, so you were saying if there is a team member who has the knowledge,
Yeah, how are we
transfer it?
doing team management, right? There's technology that you can use for learning and development, et cetera. So what are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah, so if they're in the practice, I mean, if you've got some ideas as well, I don't want to, please.
I have seen groups as small as 3 offices implement learning management systems to standardize training across the organization. As you know, 49% of people are looking for new jobs in dentistry right now. That's the ADA saying that. Dental Post has even a bigger number. Again, it's not at the clinician level, but in order to maintain consistency of the customer experience, the patient experience, or any experience for that matter, it is a good idea. It's not that expensive. Technology prices have come down so much. So if you have somebody that's really good in one of your offices and knows how to teach and train and coach, give them a raise, give them a bonus, and get your LMS strategy in place so that you can consistently train everybody that appears in any kind of job role, whether it's the front, back, middle. But yeah, absolutely, the technology prices in the LMS world have come down. I think it's a great idea to, and then do coaching automatically. So if a doctor wants to talk about something that was relevant, that is a learning opportunity, then just record a video, start it up. You can use your iPhone and put it up on the LMS, and boom, there you have it. Now you're scaling, right? The concept of scaling is important because at the end of the day, if you can use technology to help you scale training, training is the weakest link, right? Training is the weakest part of the whole equation in every office, every dental support organization. We're failing our people because we're not training them consistently, right? On what needs to be done at every role, and we just expect people to do what they're supposed to do without telling them what we expect. And so technology can be a great, I mean, there's Laura Nelson over there, was one of the first people to actually implement the idea of using technology to train people through Front Office Rocks. And she was the pioneer in getting that done. So absolutely, look at her stuff. It's fascinating of how it can you're able to just scale this across your organization with the click of a button, or just subscribe, or whatever that she has.
I'm waiting for her to raise her hand and not question, but just let us know what it is so that everybody knows
Whatever
how
it
to
is.
find out. Yeah, and we have support from the front row that it's a good program, so go see Laura afterwards. For me, it's really understanding where the baseline is of knowledge that is out there in your practice, and what system do you already have in place. If it's a matter that you have an internal communication system in place, great. If not, is a Google Drive somewhere that you share information, or is it simple Dropbox? Start where you are. I don't like to add and make systems more complex, because when I start working with a practice, it's where's the baseline? Because most of my engagements are 6 months. They're 6-month proposals. At that point, you should have just about all the tools that you need. And then if we transition and become a legacy client, then that's great. But that's really putting all the tools in place that you get the keys to the kingdom and run with it. Most practices are good with that and have enough. When it comes to that transference of finding the individuals and say, you have this knowledge, how do we share that knowledge? For me, it's not all about money, but it's all about money. And everything when it comes to it is all on percentages. So, and the reason why it is when it comes to full arch is that there needs to be fluctuation within the practice, because if a case is sold for a single arch at 25 or at 22, there needs to be that range and that flexibility with the treatment coordinator that's coming down to the final. It's not a bargain sale, it's not a used car negotiation, but there's variance within it to understand what is the opportunity with a particular patient. And I'm not just talking about different treatments, but a lot of times with the finals, it can be zirconia, nanoceramic, and PMMA. It might be somebody stays in temporary for a year or so, and there could be a membership program. There's so many different options, and rather than getting locked into a number, and everyone in the touch point of that patient journey should be able to financially benefit from that, yes. From the lead call to the dental assistants that are working directly with that full arch, because they have to up their knowledge in game. Because if not, then why would they want to get extra work and have to learn something brand new? If you want to keep your people happy, pay them well. and then also the treatment coordinators and then the clinicians. But if you're bringing an outside surgeon to be able to do a case, why would you pay them a static number? Why wouldn't you pay them a percentage of what's happening, especially if they're involved in the full arch case? So it's all a layer and it's all a number of percentages, but if you don't know how to present that, then how are you going to find people who are going to come in and be excited about it, right? How many times have we seen doctor goes away to a CE program, they're all excited, they come back Monday morning and say, we're going to do this. Everybody in the practice is like, yeah, right, doc, we're not doing crap. And then what happens, right? It never gets implemented. Doctors, how many times have that happened? Don't raise your hands because your staff are here, right? But that happens all the time, right? It's really frustrating. So for me and clients that I work with, I strongly encourage, which means that I make them do it, it's all on a percentage basis of what is that. Because if you're going to do a single arch at 25, a full arch should be what, 45? But you can do it at 50. So I don't tell anyone how to do anything, but I just share best practices from all the practices that I've worked with over the years. And this is what I know to be true. And that incentive-based, and it doesn't have to be crazy, right? It's a simple Excel sheet, and you just do it on a sliding scale, and they figure out the numbers. So technology can be simple, technology can be complex, and those that have the knowledge and the training, that's where they get a bump on the override of everything that happens. Because if you're going to train people all along the way, why wouldn't you get a little spiff all along the way as they get better for what they're doing? That's my philosophy. I guess it's the sales in me, and it always has been, always will be. I come from a family of salespeople.
One thing related to what we've done recently, especially after COVID, where capacity has become a big concern, right? There is plenty of patient demand, but you don't have room in the schedule to put them in. And part of what we measure when patients call in is are you able to schedule the patient within a reasonable amount of time for them to actually show up for an appointment? We have clients, it takes 35, 40, 50, 112 days yesterday I saw for a new patient appointment. I mean, you think somebody's going to show up in 112 days. Kind of crazy. If you're a GP practice and you're starting to market to get full arch cases, you have to be able to get them in very quickly. You cannot have booked out. I mean, if you can't get them within a week, don't spend any money on marketing because it's pointless, right? The other thing that I learned, I spoke at a full arch event last year, and this one doctor had this brilliant idea of triaging for revenue, which meant that if like a patient shows up and you have to know within the first 10 minutes if they have capability of paying, and then getting them the hell out of the chair if they cannot. Sounds bad, but sometimes in order for you to create capacity and being able to get people who are going to pay into your chairs and not making them wait, is understanding how you figure out how long before you decide the patient needs to be, because you have an hour consult, hour and a half consult, and there is no ability to pay. So they had done a very interesting set of questions that allowed them to understand the propensity of that patient to be able to afford, even remotely afford what it is. So it was very interesting. I thought I'm just going to, it's got nothing to do with anything about technology, but it was very interesting how he made sure that everybody could afford it. And it was with the intention of creating capacity. Capacity creation, there's plenty of patients out there. Good marketing is going to drive plenty of patients. These guys have figured it out, how to get patients to do it. The challenge for you is going to be, is how do you get those patients seen in the quickest amount of time and getting them through that funnel, right? In the quickest possible way. So the communication that Greg teaches, the processes, the financing that you need, all that needs to be buttoned up so that you can literally, this problem, what, the 306, there's 7 million people who don't have any teeth in America. That's 300, that's 50,000 apiece. That's $350 billion industry. That's bigger than the current dental industry combined. So there's so much out there. It's just a matter of figuring all these little things out and buttoning them up and tying them bows around them and leveraging technology for that. So this problem can be solved very easily, but if you don't have the capability of seeing the patient, then none of that matters. So that's my 2 cents at the end.
Okay. All right. Well, we want to thank Greg, Amal, thank you guys so much for coming on. Really kind of, I guess, summarize this all and bring it all into a close, that technology, again, is just that piece, that process, right? Making sure that you guys understand what's going on within your organization, within your people, and with the steps that you're having people do. Then figuring out where can the technology enable or maybe even make worse sometimes by overcomplicating this process, making sure you're working together